December 7th, 1941, a day that will forever live in infamy in the hearts of Americans and people around the world. Many people are aware of this tragedy, but not a lot of people know what happened leading up to it. The attack on Pearl Harbor was a surprise, but Japan and the United States have been edging toward war for decades. The United States was particularly unhappy with Japan's increasingly belligerent attitude toward China. The Japanese government believed that the only way to solve its economic and demographic problems was to expand into its neighbor's territory and take over its import market. In the effort to take over China's import market, Japan declared war on China in 1937. American officials responded to this aggression with a battery of economic sanctions and trade embargoes. The U.S. thought that without access to money and goods, and especially essential supplies like oil, Japan would have to contain its expansionism. Instead, the sanctions made the Japanese more determined to stand their ground. During months of negotiations between Tokyo and Washington, D.C., neither side would budge. It seemed that war was inevitable. But no one believed that the Japanese would start that war with an attack on American territory. For one thing, it would be terribly inconvenient. Hawaii and Japan were about 4,000 miles apart. For another, American intelligence officials were confident that any Japanese attack would take place in one of the relatively nearby European colonies in the South Pacific, the Dutch East Indies, for instance, or Singapore or Indochina. Because American military leaders were not expecting an attack so close to home, the naval facilities at Pearl Harbor were relatively undefended. Almost the entire Pacific Fleet was moored around Ford Island in the harbor in Hawaii, and hundreds of airplanes were squeezed into adjacent airfields. To the Japanese, Pearl Harbor was an irresistible target. The Japanese plan was simple: destroy the Pacific Fleet. That way, the Americans would not be able to fight back as Japan's armed forces spread across the South Pacific. On December 7th, after months of planning and practice, the Japanese launched their attack. At about 8 a.m., Japanese planes filled the sky over Pearl Harbor. Bombs and bullets rained onto the vessels moored below. At 8:10, an 1,800-pound bomb smashed through the deck of the battleship USS Arizona and landed in her forward ammunition magazine. The ship exploded and sank with more than 1,000 men trapped inside. Next, torpedoes pierced the shell of the battleship USS Oklahoma. With 400 sailors aboard, the Oklahoma lost her balance, rolled onto her side, and slipped underwater. By the time the attack was over, every battleship in Pearl Harbor, the USS Arizona, USS Oklahoma, USS California, USS West Virginia, USS Utah, USS Maryland, USS Pennsylvania, USS Tennessee, and USS Nevada has sustained significant damage. In all, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor crippled or destroyed nearly 20 American ships and more than 300 airplanes. Dry docks and airfields were likewise destroyed. Most important, almost 2,500 men were killed, and another 1,000 were wounded. But the Japanese failed in their plan to cripple the Pacific Fleet. If anything, they had only awakened a sleeping giant. The following day, on December 8th, President Roosevelt addressed the American people in one of the most famous speeches of all time.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan. The United States was at peace with that nation, and at the solicitation of Japan, was still in conversation with its government and its emperor, looking toward the maintenance of peace in the Pacific. The attack yesterday on the Hawaiian Islands has caused severe damage to American naval and military forces. I regret to tell you that very many American lives have been lost. In addition, American ships have been reported torpedoed on the high seas between San Francisco and Honolulu. As Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy, I have directed that all measures be taken for our defense, but always will our whole nation remember the character of the onslaught against us. no matter how long it may take us to overcome this premeditated invasion, the American people in their righteous might will win through to absolute victory.
Congress went on to approve Roosevelt's declaration of war. 3 days later, Japanese allies Germany and Italy declared war against the United States. The rest is history.